Hello and welcome back to FatbossTV. Today we continue our Mythic Dungeon Guide series with the Motherlode.
So this tutorial will give you everything you need to know for your Mythic 0 runs before the raids come out in the coming weeks, but almost all the information can be applied to higher Mythic Plus keys. So let's jump straight into it.
Going towards the first boss, you'll need to fight a corridor of trash. Whenever you encounter a mech jockey, always kill them first. They will often run towards a mech and activate them with a 5-second cast, and this cast cannot be interrupted with kicks, so instead you must use your stuns or other hard CC. If it does go through, you need to deal with the mech peacekeepers. Whilst their shield is active, you must attack them from the opposite side to continue dealing damage. You must also avoid their tear gas patches, as well as keep spread to prevent their charged claw chain lightning effect from bouncing. When fighting mech jockeys, watch out for their concussing charge red grenade zones to avoid the knockback. Refreshment vendors are also important targets to focus down. Their iced spritzer channel targeted at a random player will slow, and the final tick will apply a 6-second stun, so make sure you interrupt the cast or dispel the stun. Most important to kick is their Caja-Cola cast. This applies a hot to a mob that cannot be purged. Whilst clearing the area, try not to pull too many of the thugs. Their charge and subsequent 2-second stun is completely unavoidable. Make sure you kick that Inhale Vapors cast to prevent them from enraging, or just soothe them after the cast. Hired assassins deal damage to the entire group when they channel Hail of Fletchets. You'll want to stun them during the cast to interrupt it. It is also vital that their Toxic Blades cast is kicked, otherwise they deal additional damage with their melee attacks, but more importantly, their Hail channel. After so long, you'll make your way to the first boss, the coin-operated Crowd Pummeler.
The boss's most important ability to deal with is Foot Bomb Launcher. These bombs land within the room and explode 15 seconds later, dealing damage to the group and implying a damage taken increase. You can, however, kick these bombs back towards the boss. If you hit him, they'll do damage to him instead and apply the damage taken increase. Tanks should try and keep the boss still so bombs are easier to aim. Your tank will also need to make sure they face the boss away from the group at all times for his shocking claw. This cone will just stun players if they're hit. You can avoid the cast as a tank, just move away the moment the cast starts. Now the group will take a burst of damage that knocks them back when the boss casts Static Pulse. This damage is unavoidable, and it's something that really you only have to watch out for on higher keys. Whilst fighting the boss, the crowd will throw coins into the encounter space. The boss will attempt to absorb these coin piles if they're within 15 yards of him. Each time he does so, it'll increase his damage by 10% permanently. So it's important that the tank moves the boss away from these coin piles. Once you've got that guy dead, it's time to make your way through the mine.
Now watch out for the Sapper's mining charges. This bomb takes 5 seconds to detonate and is pretty easy to avoid. However, when a Sapper is low on health, they'll fixate a target and try and blow them up. If you're the target, make sure you move away from them. You want to kick the Earthshaper's Earth Shield cast. If this goes through, whatever mob gets the buff heals for a shitload. This buff can be purged. Whilst tanking the Azeroth Extractors, make sure you're facing them away from the group for their power through cast. Stone Fury Elementals deal a large amount of damage with their Furious Quake cast over 6 seconds, so make sure you interrupt it. Also make sure that the Tectonic Barrier is interrupted. This 12-second buff grants an Absorb Shield and makes them immune to interrupts, potentially allowing a Furious Quake cast to go through, which of course sucks. Just before you get to the second boss, Azeroth, you will need to deal with Taskmaster Ascari and some trash. You want to make sure you focus down the trash first. When the Taskmaster casts cover, move all mobs away from him because they'll be taking 75% less damage. When the Taskmaster reaches low health, he'll no longer cast cover and will begin to hit the tanks harder, so on higher Mythic Plus keys you might need to save cooldowns or kite at this point. Once you made your way down the path, you will reach the second boss, Azeroth.
Now there are 2 strategies for this fight that you can choose based on your composition. Azeroth starts the encounter with 4 Earth Rager adds. Now these adds will fixate a random player until either the ad dies or the player dies. You can decide just to nuke these on the pool, or you can CC them. If your group can consistently CC all 4 for the entire fight, that might be a better option than killing them. You can use the 2 fracking totems just outside the encounter space to give you an extra action button that will allow you to stun them for 60 seconds. The boss, however, will periodically buff an ad, which will free it from CC. During this time, it will take and deal extra damage, so any of the empowered ads, you just gotta nuke them down. The boss will also spawn additional ads throughout the fight, and again you can decide to either CC them or just nuke them. When the boss casts Resonant Pulse, this will cause all non-crowd controlled ads to begin to deal AoE damage within a circle around them. This really hurts, you need to make sure that you avoid it. Aside from that, the tanks need to make sure they face the boss away from the group, as he has a cone that will knock you down. You can avoid the cone just by sidestepping the cast. After Azeroth is dead, take the cart down the minefield and follow the path towards Rizza.
Tanks face the Feckless Assistance away from the group for the Blowtorch cast, or interrupt it, but the highest priority is to kick the Transfiguration Serum. This 5-second cast will transform them into a new mob that bites random players, applying a dispellable disease dot. Venture Co alchemists have 2 interruptible casts. Caustic component should be largely ignored as it just deals a burst of damage, however the transmute enemy to goo cast must be kicked. This is a 10-second polymorph debuff which can be dispelled as it is a magic effect, but if it's cast at your healer, you'll likely wipe. Watch out for the weapon tester's force cannon. This 3-second cast hurts and knocks back all players within a frontal cone. Tanks also want to face these guys away for their Echo Blade silence cone. Healers need to quickly dispel the silence off the tank when they're hit. The mastermind should always be killed first. They'll buff mobs with a damage increase and hot, you want to purge this if possible. They'll also spawn orbs that deal ticking damage around them. This damage will also heal the mastermind, so make sure you're keeping away from the orbs. After making your way down the path, you'll finally reach Rixxar Flux Flame.
Rixxar will frequently cast Chemical Burn, which applies a 10-second magical dot to 2 players, usually the tank and a melee DPS. The healer should dispel one player whilst healing the other. Range players should stand around the edges of the encounter space, as this will help keep the incoming Azerite catalyst patches away from the melee. These patches simply just deal ticking damage if you're stood within them. Additional patches of goo will spawn from the pipes around the encounter area when Gushing Catalyst is cast. The areas in which the patches will land is clearly marked, just make sure you move from them quickly. Now Rixxar's most important ability is the Propellant Blast. She will face the location of a random player and spray out propellant in a cone face towards that direction. The propellant deals damage to that player and pushes them away, but this pushback also affects the patches on the ground, so you'll need to be as efficient as possible with this spray, making sure that it's faced towards the most amount of goo possible, otherwise you may potentially run out of space. After defeating Rixxar, keep following the path down towards the final boss. Crawler mines can be found jammed into the ground throughout this area. Moving close to these crawler mines will cause them to activate and begin to fixate on a random player. If they reach their target, they will explode, dealing massive damage to all players nearby and applying a dot. Avoid triggering them where you can. You want to make sure they interrupt the Ordnance Specialist Artillery Barrage, if not you'll have to dodge the artillery zones. Getting hit by one of these deals large damage and applies a dot. Whilst fighting the Sky Scorchers, make sure you interrupt the concussion charge. If it does go through, then you will have to dodge the grenade landing zone, and if you do get hit, it will knock you up and deal some damage. Their Azerite Heartseeker ability is an uninterruptible cast which fires a projectile towards a randomly selected player after a beam. The first person to get hit by the projectile will absorb it, taking a burst of physical damage and receive a healing reduction debuff. On higher keystones, you'll probably want your tank to take this. As for the war machines, they'll simply just hit the tank with charge shot. This just deals a burst of damage. Aim to have active mitigation or damage reduction cooldowns available for each shot. Now, expert technicians will attempt to buff nearby war machines when they cast overcharge. This simply will just increase the war machine's haste by 60%. You'll need to make sure that you interrupt it or you can purge the buff. The technicians will also cast repair on damaged war machines, healing them up. You'll need to make sure that you displace or stun this cast. Once you've made it through all this trash, you'll finally reach the last boss, Magul Razdunk.
Razdunk has 2 abilities that he'll frequently cast. When fixated by the homing missile, you want to move away from the rest of the group. The missile will explode after 10 seconds, or more likely when it reaches you, dealing damage to anyone within 20 yards, so make sure you're the only player hit if you're targeted by it. After a short ramp up time, the boss will slowly rotate on the spot while spewing out physical damage in a cone in front of himself with his Gatling guns. Quickly identify which direction he is facing so you can avoid it. The Gatling gun will end once the boss has turned a full 360 degrees. On top of this, Boomba ads will cast micro missiles covering the room in targeting circles. Make sure you avoid them. At 50%, Razdunk will gain 3 stacks of Configuration Drill, taking to the air and reducing the damage he takes by 99%. Several big red rockets will land in the encounter space, dealing damage and applying a dot to any players near their landing locations. As soon as the big red rockets have landed, you actually need to stand relatively near to them to bait the incoming drill smash, which the boss will cast on a random player. This will mark a player with a little red arrow above their head, and at the end of the cast, the boss will fly above that player's location and slam into the ground. This deals group-wide damage whilst removing a stack of Configuration Drill from the boss if he hits a big red rocket. You need to do this 3 times and the boss will go back into phase 1 again. Whilst the boss is airborne, you'll need to deal with the Venture Coast Sky Scorcher ads that appear at the beginning of the phase. These ads are identical to the trash enemies encountered before the boss. The tank needs to pick them up to keep threat, whilst DPS nuke them down, making sure that you avoid the concussion charges. But that's all you need to know for this encounter, and that wraps up the Motherlode.
If you'd like to know more about this instance with detailed descriptions of all the abilities and strategies, then do go check out our work over on Wowhead. A link for that can be found in the description below. Before we do go, we'd like to give a huge thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You guys are absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for your continued support. If you enjoyed this video, then do drop us down a like, and we shall see you all in the next video.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.